Ashes by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 4. A Father's Protection. Jana squat in the path as she replaced the silver longsword back in its scabbard, after retrieving it from the ground where her mother had dropped it. She looked about the farm, or what was left of it, in effort to see what she may need to pack with her for a journey. Movement by the barn caught the young redhead's attention. She watched as the barn door slowly swung out, seeming on its own a few feet, and stopped. Jana eyed the door and surroundings for any other signs of movement. Maybe the wind, or maybe something more. Slinging the sheathed sword across her back, she then slowly moved her curiosity, carrying her toward the barn. Hand rested on the sword hilt, she peered around the slightly open door. A shaft of sunlight split the mostly empty room beyond the doors. Light coating of straw covered the floor, and a few burlap sacks of dried beans sat stacked to one side. But this was not what had Jana's attention. Her gaze was drawn to a large wooden chest that now sat in the middle of the room, from its normal location along the left wall of the barn. Grubneck watched from the far shadows of the barn. He had slipped in, moving the door to catch her attention. In an effort to try and help the girl, without showing himself, he had moved the wooden chest to the center of the room to get her to notice it. The goblin watched the young woman approach the chest with caution, her sword hand at the ready. A small grin parted the goblin's lips. Her graceful movements reminded him so much of her father's. He must have taught her well. Jana scanned the dark areas of the barn, sensing something was a bit off, but not knowing what. She reached down with her free hand and unfastened the simple clasp of the chest. Raising the lid, she looked inside. The chest contents completely grabbed the girl's attention away from the odd happenings in the barn. She reached inside and lifted out a cloak of flowing cloth of the darkest of greens. She watched in amazement as subtle color changes took place on the fabric in attempts to blend the cloak in its surroundings. She moved her hand through the heavy fabric. Though thick and protective, it flowed through her hands as if the lightest of silks. "Where did you come from?" she wondered aloud. Then a memory of when she was young filled her mind. She remembered her father wearing a cloak like this as he bent down kissing her. Then he climbed onto a horse and rode off with several other riders. She placed the cloak gently on the ground by her feet, then looked back into the chest. Laid out across the bottom was several pieces of fine chainmail armor. She lifted the chain shirt from the chest and was shocked that it seemed to weigh almost nothing. The metal rings were so small they were difficult to see in the dim light, making the shirt take on a sparkling fabric look. She knew nearly immediately that this was also her father's. She remembered seeing the sun glint off exposed portions of the shirt as he prepared to leave on his rounds as a marshal. "Where did you get these wonders?" she thought out loud again. "And why not use them?" she finished with a frown. She inventoried the contents. There were 2 leather and metal-plated bracers, a pair of leather and chain breeches, and a set of knee-high dark leather boots. She stood looking at the items she had laid out on the ground, her mind made up instantly. Jana reached to her waist and began to untie the sash that held her dress tight, in effort to remove her clothing. Grubneck realized she was disrobing, and he looked away quickly to protect her modesty and his honor. Jana undressed to her undergarments, dropping her dress onto the ground. She pulled the chainmail shirt over her head, and to her immediate realization, it was far too large for her, being made for her father. Then, to her surprise, the armor began to shrink and adjust. The chain shirt stopped adjusting. It now fit her like it was crafted for her by the greatest blacksmith of the realm. It fit tight to her curves, but allowed her to move with ease, like she was wearing nothing at all. She pulled on the breeches and smiled as they too adjusted to her. Jana then strapped on the bracers, feeling them tighten and adjust to her forearms. And lastly, she pulled on the knee-high boots, and before she stood, they were perfectly her size. Jana attached the hardened leather scabbard to her belt and reseated the magical longsword, then swung the green cloak around her shoulders and fastened it at her neck. Grubneck looked up and was happy to see the girl had applied all her father's armor and now wore the cloak as well, causing her to blend in and almost be invisible in the dim barn. She stood and started toward the door. This struck a memory of Peyton, strapping on the same armor and cloak. Then he and the goblin exited the barn together to go off to war. He believed right now if someone got in the focused young woman's way, it would be a war for them as well. The goblin thought hard about revealing himself to Jana, but feared the reaction the girl may have. Though not a total stranger, the goblin had not been around the Westlake family for several years. He decided he would follow the girl at a distance and help her when he could without letting her know he was there, if he could keep from it. Jana exited the barn. She looked down at her new attire and felt that after she gathered a few more things, she may be ready to go after the people that did this, that ruined her life. She looked toward a few horses that were milling in the garden, slowly nibbling on the greenery. Jana whistled sharply and was happy when one horse raised its head her way. She started toward the horse, who just eyed her curiously. It was solid gray in color, except a black mane and tail. A saddle and bags still sat on the horse's back. As Jana neared the horse, it stamped a hoof a few times in protest, causing her to stop. Slowly, she reached out her hand and just held it in midair about 6 foot from the horse, who eyed her worriedly and continued to stamp a hoof, tossing dirt. The horse tossed its head several times, but slowly moved toward the girl, till his nose touched her fingers. At her touch, the horse seemed to calm and accept the girl's strokes across its muzzle and muscled neck. After several minutes, she was sure she had the horse's confidence. Opening the saddlebags, she was happy to find a few pounds of dried meat and bread, normal rations for the road, and other camping and survival items. She found a bedroll strapped along the back of the saddle. Throwing a boot in his stirrup, she mounted the horse and gave him a ride about the garden. He had a gentle gait and ran with speed and power. She was happy with him, and he with her. Reining him to a stop, she dismounted and proceeded to continue going through the saddlebags, taking inventory. There was basic survival gear, tinder box, a few weeks of dried meat and hard biscuits, other odds and ends. She decided that she was as prepared as she could be. She just needed to decide where to go. The idea hit her almost as soon as the question entered her head. Darton, here I come. Jana's head jerked up as she woke with a start. She still sat in the saddle as her gray horse walked along the old, dusty trail. Night had fallen over the land while she slept in the saddle. Jana rubbed the neck of the horse. We are going to have to get you a name, she said as the horse seemed to toss his head in agreement. They were to the edge of the forest. She could see the skyline opening up on down the trail. Let's stop here and rest. Gray, that's it. Your name is Gray, she said. She guided Gray off the road and dismounted, tying his reins on a nearby tree branch. She patted the horse on the neck. Then, after getting a piece of the dried meat and a biscuit, Jana dropped to the ground, looking at the stars as she chewed. Suddenly, her eyes began to slowly fill with tears as her mind drifted to her parents and her destroyed life. She could not understand why this happened. A flood of questions rolled through her mind as she laid there. Why did this happen? What did they want? Who? She pulled the wondrous cloak tight around herself and rolled to her side. Tears still silently dropped from her eyes until sleep took her, and images of fire and blood dominated her dreams. Grubneck pulled the dark woven blanket over his green frame in an effort to fight the chill. As he looked out at young Jana, he admired the girl for showing such fortitude. He knew she was hurting, not physically, but emotionally and mentally. Her turmoil was very evident in her demeanor, but he was sure she would become the warrior she needed to be, just like her father had before her. Mother! The scream echoed through the woodland, causing night creatures to scurry away. Jana had sat bolt upright, the scream leaving her lips involuntarily. Her breath was coming in heavy pants, like she had run a long distance, though the night chill sweat glistened her brow. She began to look around as if unsure of her surroundings. The dream had seemed so real. The memory of it was fading from her mind, but an image of her mother on fire and screaming for Jana to help her still haunted her inner eye. Jana looked to the sky in an effort to guess at the time, but it did not matter. She would sleep no more this night. She decided there was no more reason to sit there. After a quick check of the saddle, she mounted Gray and rode off, never noticing the yellow eyes of Grubneck, who watched her closely from the thick underbrush. The sun rose into the sky, nearing its zenith, as Jana rode over a hill in expectation to see the ruined house of her grandfather. The sight she beheld was one she in no way expected. 2 horses charged past a wagon, while a dark figure backed away from 2 skeletal monsters. Jana drew her magical longsword, its blade flaring a blue light. Her heels went to the horse's flank with little thought. She bent low over Gray's neck, whispering encouragement to the fine horse to charge on. Jander's sensitive highborn ears picked up a faint beat of hooves that was out of time with the charging duo. He turned his head back, and a sudden panic gripped him. Flaming red hair flowed all about the rider's head as her longsword glowed a bright blue. Jander's breath, the voice caught in his throat. "You're dead?" he stuttered. Darton and Zara pulled their horses to a sliding stop in the loose dirt. Both leaped down, drawing weapons. The large Darton pulled a huge 2-handed sword from his back, while Zara drew a pair of wickedly curved daggers held reversed in her hands. Gray was moving like lightning across the plain, and as they neared the monsters, Jana pulled her feet from the stirrups, moving them to a squatting position on the seat of the saddle. Her knees pressed into her chest as the horse sped toward the strange happenings before her. Suddenly time seemed to slow. She could see everything clearly, and felt like she had all the time in the world to decide on her actions. "He is not your ally," the same voice that had called to her spoke in her mind. "Beware the highborn." The voice finished. Time jumped back into full speed for Jana after the voice had finished its warning. She looked at the situation in a new light, but wondered where this strange voice was coming from. She pulled hard on the reins and pushed off the saddle with her feet, using the momentum to propel her into the air. Jana landed with grace on the balls of her feet, her long sword at the ready, to take on the undead creatures almost on top of her. She felt she was ready for the fight, or so she thought, until she realized just where these undead creatures had come from. "Grandpa Rand?" she stammered as her sword slowly lowered from her ready position. Jander looked at the redhead woman in amazement. He had no idea how she survived. He was sure she was dead in the grass when he left the Westlake house. He watched as the sword tip began to falter, and a wicked idea caused his lips to curl into a smile. The wide blade of the short sword shot out, its point heading straight for Jana's back in an attempt to sever her spine. The blue flash temporarily stole away the highborn's vision in his one good eye. He felt the sword lurch in his hand. Blinking away the stars from the blue flash, he expected to see the young woman impaled upon his blade, but shock and fear was all he received instead. He stood, his arm extended, holding the now ruined short sword hilt, its severed blade lying in the dirt. The girl was bringing her longsword back to a ready position, its blade's blue glow slowly fading. Then the undead was upon them. Jana felt rather than heard the attack, and the same sensation of slowed time happened again. She felt a tingle that seemed to draw her attention to behind. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw the sword diving in for her back. She spun, trying to ignore the strange feeling of moving at full speed while everything around her moved at a much slower pace. Jana brought her sword around to block the incoming short sword, but to her surprise, sparks shot from where the blades touched, then stopped in midair and hung there sparkling. Then the blade glowed blue and sliced cleanly through the short sword blade. She watched in amazement as the wide blade hung in midair, not attached to anything. Then time restarted to normal. The elder Jana tried to stop her desecrated body from moving on, but she was just a passenger in this vessel. She watched in horror as her clawed bone hands raised in attack toward the young redhead girl who had her back turned. The clawed hands scratched, digging at the fine chain armor the young woman wore. Jana spun, no hesitation in her action, bringing her longsword in an upward strike that paid no heed to the bones in its path. Bone, rags, and decayed flesh parted like water before the magical blade. Jander felt the connection to one of the undead sever and knew that it was destroyed. He felt trapped, enemies closing in on all sides. He saw no way out of this, and now he was even unarmed. The elder Jana felt the power over her fully release, but there seemed to be no way for her to return to where Rand and her had been. She tried to get the attention of people around her, but they seemed not to be able to see her. She yelled into the faces of the people around her, but not only did they seem not to hear her, They moved straight through her. Darton charged in toward the undead Rand, his huge two-handed sword held high. His fingers tightened on the hilt as he brought it down with all his strength. He had seen undead monsters before, and believed they were just empty shells, that they contained no soul or intelligence, but all that changed in an instant. The huge two-handed sword came down with all of Darton's considerable might, but that apparently was not enough. Darton's swing was stopped, as if he had hit solid rock. A skeletal hand had shot up and caught the attack, its sharp clawed fingers digging into Darton's hands. A memory of this same move being used by Rand during a training session flooded into Darton's mind, stealing his focus from the battle. A bony booted leg shot out, connecting to the side of Darton's left leg, causing it to buckle. With a twist of clawed hands, Darton found himself disarmed. He looked on in shock from his kneeling position. This was exactly how this maneuver had played out when Rand was alive. There was no way this was just a raging undead thing. This was Rand in some way, Darton thought, and his hesitation cost him as the skeletal knees sprang up, connecting under his chin. Darton felt his entire frame leave the ground. Zara looked on in amazement as she watched Darton get treated like a novice by the undead monster. She watched in horror as Darton sailed through the air, landing hard on his back. Rand fought the magical control, but it was a losing battle. He was just an unwilling passenger being taken along to watch as his rotten hands killed his nephew. Rand gripped Darton's sword in his rotten hands. Slowly it raised the huge blade over his head. The blade sliced through the air, straight for the exposed chest of Darton. Rand screamed inside his head for this nightmare to end, and his wish was granted. A huge flash, and the crack of lightning stole away Darton's vision. The streaking bolt of energy hit Rand's decayed chest, its destructive power blasting the corpse to pieces. Rand's spirit seemed to linger for a few peaceful moments. He rejoiced in knowing that his body was stopped before he could kill Darton. Then came the pull, an invisible power drawing him back through the gateway, or swirling colors finally depositing him back in the afterlife recreation of his and Janna's home. He stood there alone, looking for Janna, but finding no sign. He saw her rotten shell destroyed, so he believed she should be here waiting. "Janna, where are you?" he said to the emptiness.